With rap's reputation of being linked to crime, the number of rappers seeing themselves behind bars is getting bigger every year. YNW Melly has struggled with the police ever since he was 16, going back to 2015 when he faced 3 counts of aggravated assault and 1 count of discharging a firearm in public. This was only the beginning of Melly's criminal history, but looking back, it's easy to see that he was going to have issues with breaking laws for a while. After the situation in 2015, things were pretty chill for Melly, although he did cop a few possession charges. Nothing too crazy happened until he was arrested in February 2019 for the alleged murder of his 2 best friends. To make the situation even worse for Melly, him and his friend YNW Bortland are also accused of attempting to stage the death of their friends as a drive-by. Since being arrested on the charges, there's really been little development in the case. What we know so far is that Melly has pleaded not guilty and that, if he is eventually found guilty, after what's going to be a long trial process, prosecutors in Florida are planning to seek either life imprisonment or the death penalty on him. Just in case you may have thought that a case that may lead to life in prison or the death penalty for Melly is a lot, him and once again Bortland are currently also being investigated for being connected to the death of an off-duty sheriff deputy back in 2017. And although they've yet to be officially named suspects in that case, they have been named by apparently high-ranking law enforcement sources, saying that investigators believe they were in some way involved in the death of that deputy. So no matter what you think of Melly, things are already not looking good for him. And with the odds already stacked high against him in this case of his 2 best friends being murdered and being connected to the death of a law enforcement officer, the possibility that he ends up seeing a lot of time behind bars is looking more and more likely. Now, Kodak Black has become way too familiar with courtrooms and jail cells, and unfortunately for him, he's gonna have to just keep getting used to it. Kodak's history of trouble with the police goes all the way back to when he was 15, when he was placed in a juvenile center 3 times in 1 year. But things have only continued to get worse for him throughout the years, and as of May 2019, he's looking at potentially being locked up for a really long time. While we could spend an entire video looking at Kodak's criminal history, we're gonna focus on what's gotten him into the most recent situation. His troubles began in May 2019 when Kodak was arrested on his way to Rolling Loud. He was arrested for apparently lying on official documents while trying to purchase a firearm on 2 separate occasions. And a few days after the arrest, he was due to be released on $500,000 bond, but the release was revoked by a judge who called Kodak a danger to the community because he wants to have access to guns. He later ended up pleading guilty to the charges and he was sentenced to 46 months in prison. And things only continued to get worse for Kodak, as shortly after being sentenced to 46 months in prison, it was reported that during a fight, he sent a prison guard to the hospital after grabbing and holding on to his crotch. Kodak apparently has such a firm grip on the guard's junk that his abdomen and intestine wall would breach. Jesus! And it later came out that Kodak was under the influence at the time of the fight and he's seeking rehab while in prison. And what's most surprising about this incident is that it happened before his sentencing and it didn't end up costing him more time in prison on its own. However, the judge did have this to say in regards to Kodak's recent record. Young people do stupid things. But the problem is, you've been doing stupid things since you were 15. This doesn't mean that Kodak's only going to be serving 46 months though. After the news had come out reporting Kodak's altercation with the prison guard, we also learned that he's facing 2 more felony charges for possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. The first charge being from one that he purchased in January of 2019, and the other one linked to a weapon found on him while he was arrested in May of 2019. And these 2 extra charges that Kodak's being tried for could lead up to 30 years each, adding a possibility of up to 60 years in prison on top of his already 46 months. And while it'll still probably be another year before we know for sure how much time Kodak will face, it's definitely not looking good for him right now. The past 2 years have been a wild ride for Tay-K. The situation began in 2016 when he was one of 7 people involved in a home invasion where 2 people were shot, with one of the victims being murdered. Tay-K was accused of hiring 3 friends to help him during the robbery, one of which was eventually found guilty of murder in March of 2018. Tay-K was only 16 at the time the robbery took place, and he was later released in connection to the incident. He was placed on house arrest, and this is when he infamously cut off his ankle monitor and fled, soon after releasing a single The Race, where he bragged about being on the run. And according to prosecutors in a later trial, admitted to some other more serious crimes. The fact that the song's lyrics were actually used against Tay-K has been seen as an unfair decision by some, but experts on the matter saw it as clear evidence against him. One University of Georgia law professor had this to say in a Genius interview. The song is used to show that he was charged, he was on house arrest, cut off his ankle monitor, and fled the jurisdiction. The song indicates he thought he was guilty. The song is being on the run after being charged with multiple crimes, and if you look into the literal simplistic lyrics, might suggest that he tried to beat a case, he didn't, so he fled the jurisdiction. Now, some people have no problem with this, but others believe that it's going to lead to a worse trend of going after rappers for literally every line that might reference a crime, and may lead to rap losing the raw, real detail of lives that rappers have lived firsthand, and fear that their words might be used against them at some point. And 3 months after his escape from house arrest, Tay-K was captured in New Jersey by US Marshals. During his time on the run, he allegedly murdered a 23-year-old man during a robbery in San Antonio and assaulted a 65-year-old man during a robbery in Arlington. In July of 2019, Tay-K was sentenced for his involvement in the murder during the home invasion when he was 16, being sentenced to a total of 55 years in prison. And along with those 55 years, he's still awaiting trial for the alleged murder that he committed while on the run after escaping house arrest and the assault of the 65-year-old man. With the way things have already gone for Tay-K, There's no chance he's going to be out of prison anytime soon. He has no chance for parole for 27 years, and even that will only happen if he manages to not get into any trouble while behind bars. Considering he's already been caught sneaking phones into prison a few times, it's unlikely that he's got to keep his act completely together for 27 years, but who knows what might happen to those 27 years? Maybe Tay-K has another race plan for us. Back in 2016, Bobby Shmurda was sentenced to 7 years in prison after a long trial for charges he was being tried on since his arrest in 2014. Shmurda's case is a very big deal, and although he ended up with a 7-year sentence, it was actually a better deal than what he was facing at first. When he was first arrested in 2014, Shmurda was being charged for allegedly leading a Crips offshoot called GS9. Police accused GS9 of being involved in multiple crimes, including murder, and this all came back on Bobby Shmurda hard, and saw him facing a possible sentence of 25 years to life. During his trial, Shmurda took a plea deal, which led to him pleading guilty for 4th-degree conspiracy to possess a weapon and 2nd-degree criminal weapons possession. However, before his sentencing, Shmurda actually attempted to overturn his plea, saying, quote, "I want to withdraw my plea. I was forced by my attorney to take the plea. I was forced." His judge, however, did deny his request to withdraw the plea and stuck with the deal they originally made, sentencing Shmurda to 7 years in prison. It's unclear what may have ended up happening if he was able to overturn the plea, but it's likely he would have ended up with a much harsher sentence. Since he already served 2 years, by the time he was eventually sentenced in 2016, the latest he could be released is December 2021. But if all goes well, Bobby's expected to be free sometime in December of 2020. This is if his parole hearing, which is scheduled for August of 2020, ends up going well for him. Now, although Gucci's been out of prison for over 3 years now, and he's managed to completely make a turnaround in his life, his rap sheet is unforgettable. With a history of problems with the police since May 2005, when a warrant was placed on his head for 1st-degree murder, a charge that was eventually dropped due to lack of evidence to disprove his self-defense plea, Gucci's seen it all. With all the stories of rappers facing insane sentences that we've covered throughout this video, we can at least look at Gucci's story as a possible positive note for them. Gucci's history of trouble with the law includes assaulting someone with a champagne bottle, assaulting someone with a pool stick, and possession of weapons and drugs. Throughout his career, Gucci's been arrested a total of 9 times, and all of this leading up to the prison sentence he infamously received in May 2014. The lead up to his sentencing began in December 2013, where at the time, things were looking really bad for Gucci. He had been charged in federal court with 2 counts of possessing a firearm as a felon, and at the time, he was looking at a possible max sentence of 20 years in prison. If things had gone slightly differently, Gucci would be locked up until 2030. However, in May 2014, Gucci agreed to a plea deal, pleading guilty to possession of firearms by a convicted felon, and the result was a huge reduction in his sentencing, lowering it from a possible 20 years to only 3 years and 3 months. And Gucci was released only 3 years later in May 2016. Although Gucci's criminal past has a big influence on his rap career, he credits his prison time for saving his life. That time in prison that he did end up serving gave him time to look back at his life and make the decision to start changing things for the positive. He's quoted saying that he met a lot of people who were incarcerated for life, and during that time, he got off drugs, lost a lot of weight, being over 90 pounds overweight when he first went in, and he did a lot of reading. For Gucci specifically, his prison time was a huge wake-up call, and it gave him time to turn his life around before he came back to the outside world. Now at this point in time, we already know the outcome of Tekashi 6ix9ine's ridiculous court case, but it's always good to look back at just how much time he was potentially going to end up serving, and what exactly ended up leading to the situation in the first place. In case you don't already know, in December 2019, 6ix9ine was sentenced to 2 years in prison after a year-long trial process where we saw 6ix9ine switch from being a rainbow-haired gangster to being a star witness in multiple cases fighting the 9 Trey Bloods. Since he's already been serving time during his trial process, Tekashi's expected to be released sometime in late 2020 if everything goes perfectly for him. And while 2 years is still a pretty long time to be in prison, things looked a lot worse for 6ix9ine. The lead up to his recent sentencing started in November of 2018 when him and several other alleged 9 Trey members were charged with racketeering, conspiracy, and firearm charges. At first, 6ix9ine's lawyers pronounced his innocence and it seemed that case was going to be like any other. But in January of 2019, Tekashi pled guilty to racketeering, conspiracy, and 8 other charges. The minimum sentencing of the charges he pled guilty to was 47 years, with a max sentence of life in prison. What followed throughout 2019 was a long trial process where 6ix9ine admitted to his own involvement with 9 Trey and the testimony which led to convictions for 2 high-ranking 9 Trey members. His cooperation with the feds was a huge part of him making a sentence way lower than expected. And the judge that sentenced him even went on to say, "Your cooperation was impressive. It was game-changing. It was complete and it was brave." And while Tekashi's managed to cop a much smaller sentence than what he was originally expected, the biggest factor is at what cost this may have ended up being to him. Many rappers have called out 6ix9ine, labeling him a snitch, saying there's no turning back from what he's done now. Some have even said that they fear for his family's safety and that there's no telling what may happen once he's out. Regardless, 6ix9ine's managed to drop a minimum sentence of 47 years down to only 2, and that's something that won't be let go of for a long time and may influence many cases in the future. The situation involving 21 Savage was very confusing for everybody, probably even 21 himself when it first happened. And this isn't because it's such a rare situation, it's because it's a situation that, by current laws in the United States, has no clear answer. In case you aren't aware, 21 was arrested back in February 2019 by ICE, who claimed that he'd been overstaying his visa since 2006. This was surprising for a lot of people due to 21's ties to East Atlanta. It turned out that he was actually born in the United Kingdom, yet he moved to Atlanta when he was 7 years old. His representative said that he has, quote, been continuously physically present in the United United States for almost 20 years, except for a brief visit abroad. This basically meant that he had lost his legal status to be in the United States when he was very young, at no fault of his own, and he had no easy way to fix it while he was still a child. In 2017, 21 applied for a U visa, a visa which is usually given to people who are victim of crimes and helpful investigation of those crimes. The application was related to a near-fatal shooting 21 was a victim of in 2013. Unfortunately, however, the situation gets more complicated than that. When 21 was arrested, ICE claimed that he's a convicted criminal, and that's in reference to his felony charge that he pled guilty to in 2014. The conviction was actually dropped, but according to experts, dropped felonies are still considered convictions in immigration cases. 21 was released on bond, but ICE is still looking to deport him in the future, and he's currently waiting for a hearing. 21's lawyers are planning to fight the possible deportation on the grounds that cancellation of removal is available to undocumented immigrants who have been in the US for 10 years and can show their deportation would cause hardship to a spouse, parent, or child who's here legally. And since 21 has 3 kids and he's been in the US for 19 years, he fits that mold, but only time will tell what'll ultimately happen to him. Hey yo fam, what are you doing, bro? Click on this video on the screen. You see that video right there, dog? It's a pretty good video. I couldn't lie to you, man. I would never cap, you know what I mean? Not me. Seriously though, this video's over. You might as well click on that video right there. Let's just keep the entertainment rolling, you know what I'm saying? Just click on it, bro.